they made fundamental contributions to the field of Chicano studies and ethnic studies as we know them. In the wake of the civil rights movement, a wave of Chicano youth mobilized across the country, and from the masses arose some of our history's most important leaders who have transformed our present through activism in the face of hatred, racism, bigotry, heterosexism, patriarchy, ableism, and xenophobia. Today's panel of guest speakers include key individuals in the student struggles at Cal State LA. These women fought against the sexism that many Chicanas endured within the movement by the men that were in charge. Chicanas did not want their voices to be shut down and began to have meetings in their homes. Their passion to fight the patriarchy led them to create the Cal State LA chapter of Comisión Femenil Mexicana Nacional. These women came to be known as the fearsome foursome on campus. Before we introduce these amazing Chicanas, it is important to acknowledge the women who are not physically present with us today. Activists Alicia Dicha Hernandez and Frances Cortes have passed away. Although they may not be physically here with us, their lives, experiences, and contributions have made a huge impact on the world and the Chicano movement. So it is my pleasure to introduce these incredible Chicanas. We have Marta Palacios, Diane Ortega, who's joining us on Zoom, and Victoria Castro. Let's start off.
Oh, we can't hear her.
Can you hear me?
Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay, let me tell you the problem I'm having is I can barely hear what you're saying. It's very muffled. So if somebody there, when Victor said, hi, everybody, I heard it perfectly. So if you need me to respond, have Victor or somebody restate what the moderator is saying. Okay, so hi, everybody. Do you want me to introduce myself? I'm not sure what you're asking.
We're just starting out. I wanted to ask how, well, first of all, thank you for being here. And how are you all doing?
Okay.
Let's start with Marta. So how are you doing this week?
Very well. I'm doing very well. Very pleased to be here. It is such an honor. And to tell our story. And I hope that you guys get something out of it.
Well, other than the parking, I'm doing really fine. You know,
The
I'm
parking.
at school at Hollenbeck, so I even read the Hollenbeck parking lot. It's full. This was full. They wouldn't let me into the parking lot. So now I'm relaxed, but I'm always excited to come here at the Roosevelt. Fond memories and lots of learning went on for me. Diane?
Okay.
Your turn, Diane. Yeah.
All right. You want me to introduce myself?
Or say hello?
We just wanted to see how you were doing this morning.
Oh, that's, yeah, I can hear whoever said that. Perfect. Thank you. Good morning. I'm happy to join you here from my home in the desert. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to drive in today for this, but I'm doing well, and I'm looking forward to the panel discussion. And thank you for inviting me. I really do appreciate it. I hope I can contribute.
Thank you so much. So we will actually be starting with 8 to 10 minute individual testimonial. We would like for you all to share with us, tell us who you are and those things that made you the organizer you became. For instance, where were you born? Where did you grow up? Can we get any school names so that we can situate where you are from or what you consider your hoods to be?
Okay, you want me to start?
Yeah, we can start with you.
Okay. All right, I'm Diane Holguin. I'm a third generation Los Angeles native. And only recently, like 5 years ago, moved out of the LA area into Palm Springs. I attended public school in East LA, went to Fort Boulevard Elementary, 4th Street, Griffith Junior High School. Then we moved to Montebello when I was in about the 9th grade and graduated in 1967 from Montebello High School. Went to Cal State, LA, in and out of school for quite a few years. Didn't graduate from there until 1976. And then I also got a graduate degree in strategy, Master of Science in Technology Management, focusing on strategy from Pepperdine in 1992. And so I got my degree in finance from Cal State LA. And then in about 1970, 71 was recruited to join the Comisión Femenil Mexicana at Cal State LA. And I guess we'll talk about how that was founded and what was the purpose and all of that sort of thing. Attended the conferences, the LA Regional Conference and also the Houston Conference. I was a student body women's president at Cal State in 1972. And also worked in the community with Alicia Escalante in 1973, 74, and a little bit into 75. And then in between there too, 1 year in there, I think it was 72 or 73. One of the times I quit school, I was recruited by Francis Bojorquez and Lillian Aceves, and also approved by Francisca Flores as coordinator for the Chicano Service Action Center, which was a department of a brand new, first of its kind, women's center, which was a Department of Labor funded program, and it was focusing primarily on women's issues in health and employment. Okay, so that was our focus, health and employment. And our purpose was to seek resources to assist women in the workplace. So that's my community involvement. And then when I finally did graduate from college in 1976, I was hired in a management program by Pacific Bell, and I ended up retiring from there in 1997 as regional manager in network engineering and strategic planning. And then after retirement, I did some volunteering at the Huntington Library in the schools program, bringing inner city students in, to tour the museums, and it was education focused. Also, I joined the PCC Foundation board in 2012, and raising funds for student programs and scholarships, and now I wanted something else to do, so because I retired pretty young. So in 2004, I became a realtor, a real estate agent. And so now I'm a semi-retired agent. And I'm married, no children, have a couple of stepchildren, and a very large extended family. So that is me. I'm who am I? I'm a Chicana born and raised here in Los Angeles. My family is originally from the Sinaloa, Sonora area of Mexico. And I'm also kind of a hobby genealogist as well. So if you want any guidance on that, I'm happy to help you with that. So I think that's me. That's it. Hopefully that wasn't too long.
Thank you so much. Vicky, would you like to go next? Microphone.
I'm gonna stand up because that's my nature as, teacher or principal. I can't sit and talk to students. First of all, I guess I grew up here in Boyle Heights. We actually lived in, off of 17th and Central where the Santa Monica Freeway is, that part of town. But then they built that's, I don't know how old I am after all this. They built the Santa Monica Freeway. There were days when there weren't freeways here. And so we moved to Boyle Heights. And so I started second grade at Euclid, then I went on to Hollenbeck, and then I attended and graduated here from Roosevelt. These are my friends that were in Comisión. I went a little different route than Comisión for my beginning as an organizer, but I hooked up with them all the time because they were fun. And they also were very, very verbal. So when they hear about the fearsome foursome, let me go back to tell you that I wasn't one of them, but I was in Umas and Mecha, and which was predominantly male at the time. In Comisión Femenil started chapter at Cal State. And I used to laugh because the guys in Mecha, these women would take them on. And so at the time, the LA Rams were here already, and their front line of football defense was called the fearsome foursome. So when the guys in Mecha would see these four women, Dicha Hernandez, who became my comadre, Diane Holguin, Martha Palacio, and Francis Bojorquez, they would say, "Here comes the fearsome foursome," and they would be afraid of them. So that's how they got their nickname. I always laughed. In fact, I was always too short to hang around with them. That's tall. Diane's tall, and I used to tell them they're the tallest Chicanas I ever met in my life. And so after, I guess my organizing light went on after I graduated from Roosevelt, but there was an incident or an experience I had here in my senior year here at Roosevelt. I was like a good student, not like an excellent student, but I had brothers that were at UCLA, and they told me I had to go to a four-year college. I was more of the little social group, and I went to the dances and the football games, but I played a little bit with leadership. I don't know what I was in leadership, but I don't even remember that far back. But my senior year was the first year they held a conference called, then it was called the Mexican American Youth Leadership Conference in Hess Kramer. And like I mentioned to you, I went to Euclid, Hollenbeck, and Roosevelt. So I didn't know what it meant to be a minority. It was Mexicans, Mexican Americans, Chicanos. We were the majority, so I had no idea I was a minority. And I go to this conference, and there's students from all over LA County. And I listened to them where, they were not the majority in their high schools. And they had all these other, bullying because they were Latinos. In fact, one friend I met, she made me laugh. She said that there were only 7, she went to a parochial school, but there were only 7 Latinos, Mexicans in her school, and 4 of them were her family. That's how different the ethnicity in her school was. So I came back and I heard things from them like they weren't encouraged to go to college. They had to hang out at a certain part of the school. They didn't participate in the football games. All these things because they weren't comfortable in their school. So when I came back here, I'm still like, I'm happy, whatever. But then I started thinking about looking what they were saying and what could I see here at Roosevelt that would pop up like that. Like I tell you, I had 2 brothers that were at UCLA who told me I had to go to a 4-year college, but I never had a counselor tell me that. I was in classes that prepared me for college because of my brothers. But I'm just going to go a little bit into that because I could talk for longer than anybody here. I came from a very Mexican father. Boys did this, girls did this. My brothers had no curfews, no rules. I was already 21 and I had a 12 o'clock curfew. So I sought out as a senior, Mills College in the Oakland area where there's a Catholic women's college. Now, if I got accepted there, how was my father going to tell me no? I couldn't imagine. So I went to go see the college counselor here. And I said, how do I apply to Mills? I want to apply to Mills. And she looked straight at me and said, I think you should go to East LA College. And if you do well, maybe you could transfer to a four-year college. Oh my God. I was like, I didn't have the wherewithal to tell her, no, I want my application. I want you to help me. I was like stunned. And so I walked out of there not knowing what I was going to tell my brothers, not my parents or anybody, but they wouldn't give me an application for a four-year college. She wouldn't help me. Then I had another friend. There were sometimes, classes that like the algebra and the college prep courses, there's 30, 35 students. There were probably no more than 4 or 5 of us that were Mexican in classes. And one was my best friend. She had exactly the same experience, except she wanted to go to UCLA. And they told her, no, if you do well, maybe you can, transfer. So we talked, her parents had an expectation, my brothers had an expectation. So we got the bus and we went to LA State College at the time. We went to admissions and said, we want to go to college here. And it was a 4-year college, so someone helped us fill it out. And to the surprise of our counselors, we got admitted like that because we had good grades. And so I was relieved, but I wasn't going to move out of the house. That was my only disappointment. I wasn't going to go away to college. So then I go to Cal State LA, and this will be where I'll wrap it up for you so that I call her Nana instead of Martha, can talk, is when I got to Cal State LA and I walked the campus, it was probably 80% Anglo, some Asian, some Black. And when we walked down that pathway, if you saw somebody else, you checked each other out like, is she not? Is she not? And you were like afraid, And so the only group that I hung out with, and that year, only 5 kids from Roosevelt went on to Cal State LA. And two of us were best friends, and the other 3 dropped out the first year. So we were just not, prepped. But that was the first time I really felt, what is a minority? How does a minority feel? I didn't go far away. I'm kind of El Sereno. I'm in the college in El Sereno, and now I'm a minority. So all of the things that I heard at that conference, my educational experiences here kicked in, and that things were not right. Things were not right, and people from especially Roosevelt, the East Side, were not encouraged to go to college. So that urged, I went back to the camp as a peer counselor and continued. And 2 years later, I was fortunate through the guidance of some other, a bit older than me, Latinos, one being Richard Alatorre, Phil Montes, and others that helped us form a group called, first name we took on was Young Citizens for Community Action. That became Young Chicanos for Community Action, that later became the Brown Berets. I stayed with the group. We had 2 main issues that we worked on: educational issues, trying to get more kids to go to college, which led to the walkouts on the East Side, and the other was police brutality. And so that's where I began my organizing. I became the first president of Young Chicanos for Community Action, or YCCA. And as I said, I was going to college, and I went in 63, but it took me 10 years to get a BA because I tell people I was fighting the revolution. So I never had time for a full load until I was breaking up with a boyfriend and I wanted to get out of college. And then I took like 30 units, 40 units, and all that kind of stuff. But it was my pleasure to support Comisión, hang out with them, work with them on some of their efforts and their comps. And we have are they old enough to hear the story? Well, I'll let you tell the story
Which
later.
one?
No. So I'll leave it there. We had a good time. We were good friends, and we continue to see each other. The 3 of us have been on boards together, and we've remained friends. And we really do miss one of our special friends, Nita Hernandez, as I said. So I'll leave it at that.
Before we continue on, just to remind you all here, you can write any questions that you have in the index cards, right? And then Giselle will pass by and she'll collect them. And if you're not comfortable, right, asking your question, she will do it for you. So just as a reminder. So we'll be moving on to Marta.
Hi, again, thank you for having me. I was raised here in East LA. You know where B's is, the famous burritos? You know that really ugly house in the behind it? That's where I lived. My grandma lived upstairs with my aunt, and we lived downstairs. And I lived with my mother and a shitload of kids. She had so many kids. It just seemed like she was having them and having them. And I used to look at her and think, what the heck, you know, but I was third to the oldest. My brother and sister graduated from Roosevelt High School. And we lived before Hollenbach police station used to be right next door to B's. Okay, that's the old police station. So I used to know all of the detectives, and then some of the inmates, you know, we became friends and they would give us food and we would give them tortillas, and then we'd play volleyball over the fence, you know. So we were very poor, very, very poor. And around the 5th grade, when I was very happy that we did move, because there was a lot of issues at the elementary school. I went to 2nd Street Elementary. Lots of issues. I was afraid to go to school. So we moved to Highland Park. And at the time, Highland Park, I would say, was predominantly white. There were some Latinos there, but it was predominantly white. I did have some issues there. I didn't fit in. We were poor. They had more money than my family did. And also being Mexican, you know, it was very difficult because at that time, the Mexicanos that were coming in, it was like very Mexicano. And then you had another group of Latinos, like we had been a little bit more acculturated, like 3rd generation. And you had to be in one group. You couldn't go with the white kids. You know, and if you try to make friends with the white kids, I mean, it was looked down upon, you know. So this is way back like the early 60s, you know. So then my family decided to move again. And we moved when I was in junior high, I believe it was the 8th grade, we moved to Montebello High School. And I mean, Montebello. And in Montebello, the Chicanos were white, so a lot of them. There were some that were coming from Belvedere that were kind of cholo-ish. And then you had like the 3rd generations that we would call ourselves the mods. And we, you know, and then you had a bunch of white kids, just a bunch of white kids. And like Vicky touched upon it. I remember hanging out and I had pretty good grades, but that was only because I liked school. But my mom didn't really push me. She would rather I stay home and help her because there were so many kids. And so I had pretty good grades. So a teacher pulled me aside and said, you know, if you keep hanging out with them, you're not going to do well in life. And I was like surprised. I was like, what the heck? You know, what do I do? I like hanging out with them much more than hanging out with some of the other people. And I know Diane and I experienced this where when we lived in East LA, you only wore certain colors, black, brown, blue, you stick to gray, you know, subtle colors. And Montebello, they had money. I mean, they're wearing pink and yellow. Who the hell wears pink and yellow? I mean, it was very, I was like shocked. I'm like, wow. So, but I graduated from Montebello High School with Diane, and I went to East LA College. I didn't go to a four-year college. I went to East LA because it was cheaper. It was very cheap at the time. I had a boyfriend, and he had a car, and he had a job. Well, I went to East LA College, and I don't know how it happened. I ended up joining La Vida Nueva. That's a very old organization. La Vida Nueva was pretty much a leftist organization, and I got very involved. A friend of mine, Teresa Gonzalez, who we're still very close, we had the first Cinco de Mayo. We fought and fought and fought, and we got the first Cinco de Mayo at East LA College. There were Chicanos there, but they were not the majority at the time. So we started working and having a Cinco de Mayo. We started building the organization. I remember the Brown Berets came to our Cinco de Mayo. And then from there, my boyfriend who wanted to get married said, you either knock this crap off, of being politically active, or we get married. Because he didn't like all that. What are you doing? So I had to make a decision, and it was a real hard decision because he had a nice car. So he did. I had in my heart, I was determined to go to college. And the reason I was determined to go to college is when I was 15, I worked at this company, and they made boxes, and the smell of the glue, and you just do stacking boxes 8 hours a day, just stacking. And then the buzzer would go off. You'd run, go get something to eat, the buzzer would, go off again, and you'd have to run back. And I thought, oh, hell no, this is not what I want to do. The second reason that I was determined to go to college is that I saw how my mom lived. She was completely dependent on my stepfather, who was a complete jerk. Brutal. He was brutal. And, she got beat up a lot. And, even though I tried to tell her and try to get her away from him, at the time, there was nothing else. She had to endure it. And so I just had this in me like, oh, heck no, I will never do that. I will never depend on a man. So sadly, I broke up with my boyfriend, and I decided to continue in college. And when I went to Cal State LA, like Vicky said, I got in through the EOP program, which is a program, for Chicanos. And that really, really helped, because being on campus, there was a lot of white kids, and they were, it was hard. I'm coming from a background where my mother never really said, study. I don't ever remember her saying that. So my mother wasn't too happy. My grandmother wasn't too happy. I went to college. I was at Cal State LA. I joined Mecha, because I had been involved in La Vida Nueva. I wanted to be involved at Cal State LA, making a difference in this world, making a difference so that people can find their own destiny, define it, right? So we attended, and I would say it would be, I don't think Diane, but Licha, who is Licha Hernandez, Irene, and I, and Bojorquez attended a Mecha meeting. Well, the Mecha meeting was, predominantly males, and I felt put down in there. You couldn't talk because you were a female. And there would be some heckling, and like if you didn't ask the right question or whatever. And I'm thinking, damn, I got this at home. What am I gonna do? And the women would do the grunt work. They were the idea people, and the women were, the doers, made it happen. And I think because of the way I was raised in the situation with my mother, I thought, oh, hell no, I'm not going to put up with this either. So as soon as I had been friends with Irene Davila, who was friends with Licha. Since I was 5, I knew Irene. She introduced me to Francis Bojorquez, and they started having meetings at Francis's house. And it was for the Comisión. And from there, it was exactly what I needed. Exactly what I needed. I wanted a voice. And Comisión gave that to me. Okay. So we stood at school. It was very hard. A lot of guys said some pretty ugly things to us. And women too, women too. The girlfriends of the guys in Mecha, would make snide remarks, oh, you guys think you're women's liber, or oh, you think you're this, or they're gay. That was the big one. They're gay. But that's why when you say fearsome, foursome, the demeanor that we picked up was something we had to. I don't think we would have been as successful had we not had that demeanor. Thank God we were tall. And then we dyed our hair red to look scarier. Okay. Eventually, as we started doing things on campus and progressing, and women would not join, they wouldn't say I'm comisión, but they'd hang out with us. So they might as well be comisión. But, we would have parties and we had the best of time. And eventually, we just were accepted, but it was hard. When I got to Cal State LA, there was date rape. I mean, all the stuff, but back then, you didn't say nothing. It just happened, So these are the things that interested me. And I wanted to have a voice. And that was our main goal. We want a voice. Right?
Can I interject something? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, now that I know what you wanted, I'm not going to take too much time, just a couple of minutes, but it's interesting to me that I've known these women for, I'm not going to say how many years, but it's been a very long time.
More than 10.
More than 10. And these
30.
These seminars are probably the first time we really talked about some of these things. And I have to say that I've had the exact same experience as Vicky did, going to a counselor. I had good grades. When I got to Montebello, I know we talked once about the culture shock, because I wasn't from East LA, went to Montebello, and it was a serious culture shock. I think I was in a state of I was stunned for 6 months before I kind of figured stuff out. But when I was in high school, I was in classes that today you would call them AP classes. They didn't call it that then, but it was something like that. And not until I was a senior, when they had no choice but to talk to me about applying for college and all that, because I was in those classes, did I find out that most everybody else in their junior year had been kind of scheduled to take the pre-SAT to practice and talk about getting ready for college. And I went to see the counselor because it was routine. And I told her, yeah, I want to go to a university. That was my plan, but I didn't know what I needed to do. I'm already a senior. And she said, oh, well, maybe 2 years is good enough. Don't you think? Don't you think your mother would think that 2 years is good enough? And I said, no, 2 years is not good enough. I want to go to university. So, well, okay, well, there's a couple of things, but by now it's too late, right? On my own, I made sure I got into SAT because I knew other students in my class were doing it, so I did, because that's all we talked about. But the counselor she ignored me for a couple of years, and I had no idea she was supposed to be getting in touch with me. And come to find out, my mother did think 2 years was good enough. So once I told her about it, yeah, and I think what we've discovered is our parents weren't equipped to help us. They didn't, it was more like a dream. Oh, you want to go to college? That's really nice, that sort of thing. But they had no background to know how to guide us. They didn't know what questions to ask. And there was a lot of fear. I think the biggest part for me, because it took me forever to get out of school as well, is just the fear of the unknown, what you needed to do, what you were going to become, were you going to still be the same person, that sort of thing. And I think that's what attracted me to the Comisión when Martha's the one that kind of pulled me in. And it was one of the times I went back to school, and I was very devoted to finishing, because I quit because I just wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if it was the right thing for me. And I always wanted to go to college, but I just wasn't sure, if I was going to be the same person. And I think that's what I liked about Comisión. And the primary thing I think that resonated with me is that, it gives me a chance to have a voice, to speak up, have an opinion. Now, I know Victoria Castro and Terry Gonzalez are both MECHA members and very independent women. And most of the time, the MECHA guys didn't really want you involved except to do the grunt work. But these women would say, no, I'll do this.
Yeah.
I'll be the head of this committee. But they would stand up, and they're both small. They're both little women. And they would but not everybody has is that brave, especially in that setting. You'd be afraid. A lot of women would not do it, and they would just retreat. And that's what I think Comisión gave us, is a place for women to be able to say something and not feel stupid, so.
I think one of the things is that we're taught in our culture to be subservient to male.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, like how many times, I can't tell you how many times my mom would say, fix your brother a plate. He's not crippled, why can't you do it? He didn't break his leg. I mean, so then I'd have to fight with my mom. You and your, but
well,
it's all very cultural that we were subservient. We were subservient to males.
Yeah, the very traditional roles just continued on, and that's the real battle that we had, was overcoming that.
One of the main themes that we wanted to discuss today, right, was the sexism that you all specifically endured, right, as Chicanas in the movement, in organizations like MECHA, and a lot of our live audience is in the MECHA organization here at Roosevelt, right? That's one of the reasons why we wanted them to be here in person, so that they could hear all of your experience through these organizations, right? And I know you all talked a little bit about that, so we're gonna move a little further down our questions. And so you all mentioned Comisión Femenil, right? Can you all share a little bit more of what the purpose of Comisión Femenil was? And then after, can you talk about the LA conference that you all created? So I don't know who wants to start off.
Diane, you have a little bit more knowledge about how we got certified and all of that.
Oh, for the Comisión, is that what she's asking?
Right. How we got started.
Okay.
We were at Francis's house, and then eventually we were allowed to meet.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going through all my notes, and I found an actual date of January 1971 when we were official on campus. But it came about, there was a very quickly a conference in, it was a women's workshop of the Mexican American National Issues Conference that was attended by all organizations. You know, it was an annual, or it was a strategy planning event and lots of workshops. And it was an issues conference in Sacramento in October of 1970. And, you know, MAPA and MECHA were there, and, you know, Mexican American, all kinds of organizations would go that were involved with the community and political action committees and so forth. Well, Francisca Flores is the one who organized the women's issues workshop at that conference. And it was attended by quite a few women, and they resolved that a Chicana Mexican Women's Commission be established at this conference, which will represent women in all areas where Mexicans prevail. So wherever we are, we should be there with a voice, and in leadership. And so the focus was on women getting an education, women in prison, and that the commission spell out issues to support and explore relationships to other women's organizations and movements, and women and the family, the role in the women in the family. And it's basically, if you want to be a homemaker, that's your choice. That's a great choice. But if you want to run your company, you should be able to do that and not have to ask permission, you know, and it's like we were not allowed to do many things. Okay, so that took place. So Frances Bojorquez was, at the time, she was at that conference, and at the time she was the student body women's president at Cal State LA. And so she came back to Cal State. Now all these women, you know, committed to go back to their communities and organize and try and establish what became the Comisión. And she came to Cal State, and that's where it started, at Cal State LA with Frances Bojorquez. And you know, she recruited Irene Davila and Licha and Martha. And then Martha dragged me one day. I was trying to go to class, and she said, "Come with me. You got to go with me to this meeting." I said, "No, I have to go to class. She says, no, come with me to this meeting." And so I did. I went with her. And so that was in the fall, just before January. And yeah, we did meet mostly at Frances' house. And then we went to, then we started meeting on campus. And Irene shared with us that when they did try to get places on campus, before they were questioned why they needed a meeting room. You know, this is before January. Why did they need a meeting room? And even the MECHA guys were, they try to get a room down in the EOP area where there were rooms. It was like, what for? What do you want to have a meeting about that for? You know, forget it. So they started meeting at Frances, so they, you know, have some privacy basically and get organized. So that was 1971, and then the election was coming up in the spring of 71, and Frances thought it was very important that we retain her seat, that we run somebody. You know, she and as Martha says, I got the short straw, because so I don't know how I ended up running, but you know, I got recruited to do that. And fortunately for me, I was uncontested. Nobody else ran, so I was a shoo-in. So I was the women's student president from 71 to 72. But that's how we started. I found it January 1971 is, I believe, the date, official charter on campus for the Comisión. And we organized, you know, Martha can tell you more about a lot of the activities, we're involved with lots of events on campus, organizing conferences and fundraisers and workshops and whatever, whatever was going on, we were usually involved.
Yeah, May of, what was it? Was it May 8th of 1971? We had the first Chicana conference at Cal State LA. We had some women had approached us, hijas de Guatemoc, and they were from Long Beach State. They came, they had heard about us and how we were organizing and recruiting, and how we were being successful, and so they wanted us to have a conference. So because Diane was now in a position where she could help us get money, we were able to have a Chicana conference.
Yeah, the purpose of the conference May the 8th was to raise money to go to the Houston conference.
Right.
Yeah, and that was a national conference, and so instead of everybody all over Southern California, having little conferences, we got together, and we hosted it. Mhm.
Yeah, so the main conference, we had a lot of workshops. It really sort of ignited our position, to really move forward. And yes, we were trying to raise money. The calendar that you sent? Okay. If you look, there's a mistake. Instead of saying Chicana, they put Chicano. And if you look further down, you see that there's a dance that was there, and that's the Comisión Femenil, and we were charging $2. From 8 to 2 o'clock, you could dance. And Comisión was all over the place. Everywhere we saw a woman's issue, we would take it on. So there was, you had Tierra, and you had Malo, and you had Santana. And we said, hey, where's the women? Women are not being, showcased. What's going on? Who's representing them? So we did have a woman that we would follow around, and she would be going to clubs. And of course, we love going to clubs. So, she would be there. Her name was Landy Moran. That's like a horrible name, but we couldn't get it. We couldn't get her to change it. So she was at the Comisión first conference, her and her band, and we really tried to promote her. Really did. You want to go on about Stephen's Steakhouse?
Oh, me, yeah. Actually, it's Irene Davila's story, but I'll tell it. And so Landy performed at an event. That's the first time we saw her. It was a one-day event we had on campus, and really good, kind of jazzy kind of music. And she did, the Latino type music as well, and like Sabor a Mi, which was just like everybody had to do that. Anyhow, so she was going to be, like Martha said, we followed her around, and so I think Stephen's Steakhouse is one place where they were going to perform, and there were quite a few women that Leach had recruited to go over there and support her, and they got there, and she wasn't with the band, and so Leach went up and asked what happened with Landy. Isn't she going to be here? And he said, oh no, we had to make some cutbacks. We couldn't afford a singer anymore, so we let her go. And she said, okay, well, she came to the tables and told me, okay, everybody, Landy's not here, let's go. And
Yeah.
so that vacated quite a few tables, and they were really upset about it, but that was the reason why we were there, to support her. And so we left. We found something else to do, I'm sure. But
Yeah, I think there's a story from Geta, is it Geta Miranda? Yeah, well, she remembers, you take Chicano studies classes, and it's all about the males. And so-and-so did this, and so-and-so did that, and so-and-so did this. And, Lecha was pretty upset about, hey, what about women? What about the mujeres? Where are they? And so we had a meeting, and the thing was, we were to go and start questioning the Chicano studies professors and saying, hey, how come we're not talking about any women? Are they like not around? What, what is, is there, how can we include them? Is there any women that should be talked about in history?
Yeah, could I just add a little bit about Licha Hernandez, who has
Yeah.
passed? That she graduated from Lincoln High School, and she was very much involved in the walkouts and organizing at that time. And then also too, you hear Irene Dalia, who is another Roosevelt grad. She was a year ahead of me, so she's older than me. And she used to hang out with, like me, like the social group, but at that time it was the Bugas. They used to go to the Palladium for dancing and all that kind of stuff. So these are some lifelong friends that we're talking, let's go past 30 years now. We're now into 40 and 50 years. So I wanted to give credit to Licha and to Irene.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to like jump in and ask about, right, something that I hear that we're discussing, right, which is sexism and Chicana feminism, right? So we actually have a question for that. Can you get the article that talks about Chicana awareness on the screen, please? So we actually found an archive, right, that talks about Chicana awareness, right? And I believe Francis is being interviewed in this article, I believe. If not, I apologize. But so because of the cis male dominant narrative, which you all have been discussing and talking about, telling of the Chicanx movement in the 60s and the 70s. It wasn't really until the 1980s what historians call political periodization that people acknowledged Chicana activism as a form of feminism and began to actually write about it and publish it. Historians state that Chicana awareness, or what we now call Chicana consciousness, didn't begin until the 80s. However, Chicanos were organizing way before that, but it took so long for Chicana feminism and activism to be recognized. Some of you were organizing way before the 80s. What do y'all think about this?
It was very difficult. It was very,
It's the Alvarez article.
And this one, if you check the top right part, Francis is talking about this on the bottom.
Yeah.
I'm gonna point it out to you.
This, I think it's Alvarez, the
Francis
article of
Alvarez,
Alvarez.
That's the commission with the
I had a hard time hearing her, and I'm gonna try and, what, can somebody?
Yeah, so basically I was talking about, this one, about Chicana awareness, right? Or what we now call Chicana consciousness, right? And how Chicana activism and Chicana feminism as a whole wasn't really recognized until way late in the 80s, right? And all of you were definitely organizing way before that. So we just want to get your comments on this.
Okay, as it relates to feminism as well, of the feminist movement at the time in the 70s, or just in general? Yeah, just in general.
So,
And I think that's kind of the foundation of what we're talking about, because what inspired me, I'll say, I won't say us, but I'll say inspired me in the early 70s in 1971 is my own experience. But yeah, we were accepting of certain roles, and I think us on this panel just didn't accept it. Women in general, Latinas in general, Mexicanas, Chicanas, whatever you, we were accepting. That's just the way it was, okay? And you had to accept it, and you just moved on. You tried to be your creative self as any way that you could, but I don't think it really blossomed until the 80s. We were very much in the foundation. I had an experience, I continued to experience this when I went into the corporate world, and there are always gender issues. There are gender issues, but it's more complicated with with the ethnic, with the obstacles that Black people face, that Latinos face, that Asians face, you know, culturally. So it continued on. And, you know, I was hired by Pacific Bell because, you know, I passed a complicated test. I had a degree and I was Latina because they needed my number. They needed me and I needed them because I needed a job desperately. So it continues, you know, and 15 years after I had been working, 10 or 15 years after I'd been working there, they're still battling those issues. They're still battling those issues. And as we know now, it continues, but, you know, so go ahead, Vicki, looks like you're ready.
Yeah, no, I just want to, my background's a little different in the sense of I grew up with 4 brothers, and a Mexican father, but my brothers were my advocates. And we used to have Sunday dinner where everybody had a show. And my father was always talking about politics, always talking about, you know, Roybal running, Mexicans this, that. So in that sense, I was politically aware of, and at that dinner table, I was an equal. And so I carried that. And so I started with a different inner strength of being at a table with 4 brothers that were a couple in college and a father that talked about community issues and that. So when in 65 is when I think 65 or 66, when Young Chicanos for Community Action took hold and we decided to host the walkouts, you know, I always found myself in a leadership role. And I think it was because of the strengths my brother and my father had conditioned me to. And when I got more involved in UMAS and Mecha, I observed where, you know, at the whole table, it would be all the guys, but because of my brother and my upbringing, I would go in the middle and say, you know, and then I remember some demonstration and there's going to be like 500 there. And this group of people were supposed to prepare the meals. And when I went, oh my God, there's like 20 women here making sandwiches and not one guy. I said, let's not give them any sandwiches. You know, they don't deserve it or something. But I often found that I was very lucky because I was raised with 4 brothers that treated me equally, intellectually, and my father, as much as he had his beliefs of what a woman should do and what in fact he asked, why are you going to college? And he didn't have any question with my brother's going, and I think I said, well, I don't know either yet, but when he asked it. But the difference was that I remember my mother never said anything to me about my role. She just accepted what my father said. Years later, like 20, 30 years, I think I'm in my 40s, my mother tells me, I don't know why you never stood up to your father and talked back. I go, now you tell me, mother. You know, but it was part of what I observed in her of being a mujer and being a head of the household and the family and everything. But I do thank my brothers for allowing me to share as an equal in the family. And so that made a big difference. And I just was just, anytime I saw something, I'm going in there. Like I remember I was on the Mesa Directiva at Cal State Alley, which was the beginning of Chicano studies, and we hired the staff and we interviewed, and I'd be the only female there. I think only one time I blew it with Pinochet. He was so handsome. I asked him if he was married, and all the guys jumped on me. But I wanted to know for the other ladies in the room.
I think one of the reasons I think it took so long is there was a huge issue within the Chicano movement. And when we separated, many of the Chicanos thought it was really bad. We should all be together, united, fighting for Chicanos, okay? So I guess they saw it as resources, or I don't know what, you know, but they thought that by separating, you weren't being loyal to the cause. we had a conference, the conference that we were raising money for. God, what month was that conference? in?
It was right after, it was later in May. It was, I think, towards the end of May, right after the LA regional one
It was a national conference.
in Houston. Mhm.
Houston. We got there and we're from LA. And the issues that the women had in Houston, we were so far ahead of them. Because they were, I mean, talk about really being pinned down by the culture, much more than we were in LA. So it was hard. One of the reasons, okay, what happened at this conference is that we had oh my God, sorry. Okay.
Hands up.
Just hang it up. Just hang, go ahead. What happened is that we had all these, sessions for women on all these different subjects. It was a beautiful conference. You're bringing women from all over the country. The last day of the conference, there was a group of, I'd say about 5 women. And these women basically took over the conference. They grabbed the mic and they started basically telling us, all the women, that you're disloyal. You're not supporting the main cause. And the main cause is, the Chicano movement and Aslan and this and that. Now we argued, hey, if we're being subjugated right here, why do we want to move over there? It's the same thing. It's not good for us. So that was another huge issue that I think was pushing the cause of Chicanas back.
Just to add on to the discussion, right? I think now the conversation has been moving to a intersectional, right? Like a more intersectional conversation regarding different identities, regarding race, ethnicity, gender, right, class, sexuality. So that's definitely something that spaces like ethnic studies have been trying to move towards too, right? So we'll actually be moving on to the Q&A section part, right? So if you all have any questions that you want to ask, please raise your hand and we'll have Giselle walk around and give you all the mic. Do you have a mic?
No, I don't.
Okay, then we could use that one then. And if you all don't feel comfortable, but you have your question written down, you all can just pick up your index card and Giselle will collect it and she'll ask the question for you.
You guys have a question?
We also have a question from.
Yeah, we can also get questions through Zoom.
So Pedro actually has one, couldn't make it today, but he is part of the Grito series. He says, looking back at any particular moment of youth, what words of encouragement would you say to yourself that would also speak to the high school students physically present and to the virtual audience?
Like what message I would have to use? I think it's one of that, and I grew up with it too, coming from Roosevelt, to give back. That you have a responsibility to give back. And that means open doors. So as you achieve, I was very fortunate to go into education. So when I became a teacher assistant, I learned what it took to be a teacher. But then when I became a teacher, I always mentored teacher assistants. And then when I became a teacher, I wanted to be more in charge. I became a coordinator. And then I mentored teachers into coordinating. So I always grew up with the concept of giving back. And then when I became a principal, and I have to tell you, when I became an assistant principal, I had my choice of going to be an assistant principal here at Roosevelt or going to Franklin High School. And it was a tough decision, but I went to Franklin because my whole life had been Boyle Heights and I wanted to try something else. But every time I achieved something, I always looked around, especially to Chicanos, Latinos, how could I open doors? How could I open doors? And even, I served on the Board of Education. I was elected to the Board of Education. And the funny story is I had known Nena in college and I had not seen her. And this is like 30 years later. And we have a closed session, which means it's all lawyers and big people. And Nena walks in. I go, Nena. And everybody looked to see who Nena was. And then they go, that's Miss Palacio. And I go, who's Miss Palacio? They said, Martha. And I go, who's Martha? And Nena. And so, these things, but we worked together again and we did. And then when I became principal, I made sure all my administrators would be Chicano, as many as I could. And you know what? My job is to train you to be good administrators. And I'm very proud that many of them have become principals and a couple of senior staff members in LA Unified. So it's about giving back, opening doors. You make an achievement, who can you help behind you? It's all about giving back. Right? That would be my advice to you. You're very fortunate. You're seniors. There are people that you went to junior high school that you don't know what happened to them. And in our community, when I was principal at Hollenbeck, I used to tell, you know about drugs, you're going to learn about it in middle school. You don't know about gangs, you're going to learn about it. You don't know about sex, you're going to learn about it here. I remember this little sixth grader, when I said sex, he's like, oh shit. but it's the truth. So even the fact that the majority of you are here seniors, you've achieved and you're going to go on. And if you go to college or not, or you take on a career, always think of somebody who's coming up your pathway and how you help.
Sonia, do you want to ask a question? Maybe on the spot?
No, I'm just really, I feel really emotional. So I actually graduated from Garfield, and I've been teaching at Roosevelt for like the last 10 years, but I teach ethnic studies, and one of the things that I teach often is like the walkouts. And I just learned so much today, but I was telling my students yesterday, I get to do what I do because of those who came before. So because of the work that we do. So I was not planning this.
I agree.
We're Lloronas.
We didn't do away with that. Chihuahuas here.
Dalia was my student a few years ago, and I'm just watching her talk to you and facilitate this, and I'm just so touched.
Let me tell you a funny story about coming from this community. As I said, I started off really as a dean of discipline at Hollenbeck. Years later, after I was the board, after I retired, I was doing some volunteer work, and I went to Malabar Elementary School to do something. And the principal says, Miss Castro, do you remember me? And I go, no. And then he goes, this is a grown man. I always did middle school or junior high. He says, you were real mean to me. What I do? Well, Hollenbeck police had picked him and a few boys up at Allen Beach for ditching. And they brought him to me at Hollenbeck. And so this is where culture comes in. And so just of suspending them or whatever, I said, get the phone right now, dial your mother, tell her you're in my office and why. And there were 4 boys. And one was a chillon. No, Miss Castro, you tell my mother. He's the one that became a principal. He said he never ditched again. So you never know what I knew. If you have right now, if you had to call your mother and tell her to come pick you up, holy shit, right? And so I remember you're of the 4, you were the chillon. So blessings come in many ways, and that story was like beautiful to me that I made you tell your mother you ditched. So
I have, well, one thing. I think it's important to find the courage in yourself to think for yourself. Okay, you have to think for yourself, especially right now with all the social media and all this other stuff, the trending stuff. Think for yourself, and like Vicky said, explore, open doors, go somewhere that you haven't been before, make friends that you would never make friends with, but explore. It's a big world. It's actually getting smaller, but there's a lot out there. And don't be afraid to explore and to really be true to yourself, and say what's on your mind. Okay? That's all I have to say. All right, Diane, do you have anything?
I'm not sure what the question was, but I kind of get the idea. I would just ditto with both these ladies have said, but in addition, you think about it, it's, I was at Cal State when the Chicano studies was beginning, and you kind of wonder what it was really about. Even then, it was interesting, and I would explore and go check it out. I think not just exploring what's out there, but understanding who you are and what you came from.
Yeah.
Because it's a rich history, and I think if nothing else, the Chicano studies efforts have opened that up, whereas it was oppressed forever. There was no desire by anyone for us to know who we are and what the rich history was, because it gives you a sense of purpose, or a sense of, I really come from something wonderful,
Right.
as opposed to what we were being told that we were. I mean, one of the things that I discovered, during that time, I was doing some research on something, and there was what they called the ivory tower of UCLA at the time, and this was like 1970 or something, some years before, probably back in the 50s, who knows when it was. But there were these studies that were saying that we were all, mentally retarded, basically, is what, and that was the belief, that was the mindset, so that's why we were being treated the way we were, or at least they were able to justify their behavior. And this is, at UCLA. So explore where you come from. Sometimes that's why I got into family history, and that was just fascinating, to find it. And it really, you have a better understanding of why our people came here. Some of us have been here for thousands of years already, but why we came from Mexico, what was going on in history. History became a lot more interesting when I started doing family history, is because it means so much more, and you can kind of see what people were struggling with then. So I'm not sure I answered your question, but that just came to mind while I was listening to Vicki and to Martha. And the reason why I've known Martha since we were like 14, right? But I only knew her as Martha, and I didn't get to know her family until we were at Cal State LA. So I never called her Nena, I always called her Martha. And Vicki and I have known each other, since Cal State LA, but we discovered a few years back that our parents grew up in the same neighborhood in Clanton. And we went to the same family doctor. But we didn't know that until about 3 years ago. So, but anyhow, I guess that's it. I'm rambling on. Go ahead.
Thank you. So we actually have around 10 minutes. So Erandi, do you have a question or two that you would like to ask?
I actually do have a question, and I think it'd be great to talk about this, especially with high school students here. It has to do with, I believe the three of you ladies had a bit of a different path when finishing your bachelor's degree, and that's something that a lot of people don't really talk about. And there's a lot of shame, and I don't think that's a good thing, not only because I'm also one of those people, but I think it's something that should be normalized and talked about. So
it took me 10 years to get a BA and 9 months to get a master's. So it was like, I had to work. Sometimes I had 2 or 3 jobs, and I would start off with whatever the full 12. And sometimes if I landed up with 4. So I also explored many careers. When I was in junior high and high school, I wanted to be a beautician. My favorite aunt was a beautician. I took cosmetology classes here
along with my own, because of my brothers, I took the college prep courses. And then when I got into Cal State, all my friends close, like Irene, were becoming probation officers. So I thought I wanted to be a probation officer. But then something happened, and then I sort of landed up as a teacher. Remember I told you I broke up with a boyfriend and I had to get out of town type thing. I landed up and then was like the Peace Corps Teacher Corps. And I went to Salinas and I worked with migrant ed students who had, I'm from the city. The most I ever helped the farm workers was picking up the Safeway, but now I had kids in my class that were actually, coming with blisters because they had picked the weekend and this and that. So it opened a different. And then, as I said, I thought I was just going to be a teacher, and then I wanted to do this. And then all along, though, I did community work. Even to this day, I'm retired, and I still do community work. I belong to the East Los Angeles chapter of the Association of Mexican American Educators that fought for bilingual, help the legislation for bilingual education. Dia del Maestro, we carried the resolution. Ethnic studies, we've been there all the way through, the courts and everything else that could be. So even though I'm retired, I still raise money for scholarships. We hook up for Floricanto, that's now at the Casa del Mexicano, which I grew up by. So you never, I always keep thinking, when am I only going to have one job? It never is that way. It's really never that way. But it's been challenging, scary at times. I have visions of lockout days here and police brutality and all that kind of stuff, but it just doesn't stop you. And when you just keep going,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think one of the moments that scared me the most, it was all after the moratorium. The moratorium was scary because, people were getting beat up and tear gassed, and it was brutal. So there was a meeting after with the community after the moratorium, and it was in some auditorium at one of the parks, and I don't remember what park it was at. And we were talking about, okay, now what do we do? Here we have people in jail, we have people in the hospital.
arrested.
Oh, yeah, it was a mess. So they closed the doors and we're having this meeting. All of a sudden, and I took my sister and my brother because they didn't understand what I was doing. And my sister was like 8 months pregnant, right? So we're in this meeting and we hear a big bang at the door. Well, it was the cops. And somebody, I still believe in my heart that it was like a police undercover, wouldn't let the door open. And so the more they wouldn't let the door open, the cops were pounding harder. And coming from the moratorium, I'm thinking, we're going to get beat up. And I just looked at my sister and I'm like, oh my God, I brought her to this and it's so dangerous. And I think something happened in my head and I said, this is wrong. This is really, really wrong. And since from there, you always feel you want justice. You want justice and you want a voice.
I want to say though that I don't want to, no, I've been in those fearful modes too, but I also grew up with cousins and family that are sheriffs.
Yeah. Oh,
and,
yeah.
And so I have all the respect in the world for good cops.
Yeah.
And, and when I was a principal in Salvatore, I lost 5 kids to gang violence. The only people that saved me and other students were the school police. So there's room for, there's bad in everything.
Oh,
I've seen poor
absolutely.
teachers, I've been this, that, but there's also cops that need to be removed. But I don't want to paint a picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean to do that.
No, I
Yeah.
know. But there have been scary moments.
Oh, yeah. But when I was young, when I lived right next to the Hollenbeck Police Station, there were 2 detectives. One, his name was Bill Hawkins. handsome Chicano. And he would come over and my mom would make him lunch, you know, because he loved her tortillas and that sort of thing. And, you know, he almost became my mentor. He became my mentor. He was so kind. A lot of the other cops, I mean, some of the other ones were, you know, not good, but there were some really good. And he became my mentor.
You know, I had my cousin that was in the East LA Sheriff during the moratorium and the walkouts. So we blew up a family reunion once and everything. But when I became principal at Belvedere and I was losing all these kids to gang violence, he turned out to be the captain of the East LA Sheriff and came to my rescue. So you do have family differences. I got to be honest with you, I got nephews and nieces that are Trumpers, and I don't know how that happened, but you know, needless to say, I'm not. But you know, so you have family conflict and ideals, and you just got to maneuver them, but keep on track with your beliefs.
Right.
And if you have the other kinds of beliefs that I might learn how to dialogue.
Right, right.
So sorry to interrupt, but we have like 3 minutes left. So before we close, we just want to see if y'all have any last comments that you would like to give the students or any last words that you would all like to close with. We could start with Diane. If you have any last comments or any last regards that you'd like to share.
No, I was just kind of listening at this point. Let me go last. Let me think about it a minute. As or was that it? I didn't quite hear the question that that the other gals just answered. What was the question itself?
Oh, my question was, what kept you motivated to keep coming back to school after deciding to take?
Oh, I didn't even ask.
Yeah.
I think you did.
Okay. What motive? Can you restate it? I couldn't hear her.
Why'd you come back to school when you quit?
Oh God. Okay. I quit 3 times, because I started in 67. I went straight to Cal State LA for a year, quit, went to East LA for a year and quit, and then went to work and then came back. And I think the reason I can remember when I was at Griffith Junior High School in East LA in the 8th grade, we did some exercise in class. I don't know what the heck it was, but that's when I made the inner statement that I wanted to go to school, that I wanted to go to college, and I wanted to get a master's degree. Why I thought that, I have no idea. I was in the 8th grade. And, but it must have been some kind of inner commitment, because it always haunted me. I couldn't just quit school and go to work. And then, like Martha said, she, at 15, she went to work. I couldn't quit school, go to work and be satisfied with the jobs that I was having to do. And I too, as a teenager, like 13 or 14, had a summer job in a printing factory, printing press or something like that. That cured me for sure. I thought I was going to die. It was horrid. And I thought, no, I'm not doing this because there was middle-aged women in there, sorting papers and color coding things. It was just horrible. So I think it always haunted me. It's something that kept nagging at me that I needed to finish, because I was never satisfied with the jobs that I was getting. I had something else I wanted to do, and that I didn't know what it was exactly, but I did discover it later on. But that was one of the things that kept me going, and just an inner drive, and also the support. Once I understood what the commitment meant, that there was other social sacrifices I was going to have to make. I was going to have to stop going out with my friends so much and studying a little bit more that sort of thing. Once I understood that, then I was able to, and my last, like Vicky, my last year, I think I was taking 20 and 30 units a quarter because I vowed I am not registering for another quarter. I'm getting out of here, so I finally got out. Yeah. So, okay.
Thank you so much for sharing. I actually have to cut you all off because we ran out of time, right? So I will conclude today's powerful episode. First and foremost, we want to give a special thank you to all of today's guests, and thank you for sharing your experiences along with your powerful wisdom and knowledge. Marta Palacio, Diane Holguin, Irene, Dalia, and Victoria Castro, on behalf of the Chicana Latina O Studies Department across LA, and all the guests watching, we want to thank you for your inspirational words. We actually wanted to present you all with the Grito Series Award, so I have something for you.
But because you're Roosevelt students, I know the program's over. I just want to say, you're my legacy, so you better do well.
Very good.
Oh, thank you.
And it looks like Roosevelt also
Yeah, Roosevelt also gave you all
Oh, I
a
got
little
it.
cup.
Oh, thank you. This is beautiful.
We want to thank everyone in the Crit Collective, everyone who's involved in our Grito series. They're all here and they're all also through Zoom, so thank you all. And we also obviously want to thank the audience for being here and for letting us be here in your space. If any of you would like to contact and maybe send a letter to any of these women, you can email it at gritoseries@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Instagram, grito_series_CSULA, and y'all can contact us and just keep updated on our future events. So that will be it for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is beautiful. I'll be at the Garfield Roosevelt Day on October 29th. Where's that?
Bye, everybody. Good to see you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Oh yeah, Diane, we also have an award for you, so we'll try and get it to you soon.
Well, maybe, would you mind giving it to Vicky? Because Vicky, I can probably stop by and pick it up from you.
Yeah, we could do that as well.
Yeah, because I'm in that neighborhood all the time.
All right, sounds good.
Would that be okay? Okay, thank you. Thank